welcome into this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mideles. I'm your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of deep South Texas. Got a loaded program for you today. Just a little later in the program, we're going to bring in our South Texas correspondent, Sandra Sanchez, to talk about a few different topics happening down here in South Texas. And in just a moment, once we take a look at one headline, we're going to bring in our San Diego correspondent, Salvador Rivera, who's coming to us live from the federal courthouse in San Diego as where protests took place this morning, kind of tacking on to that story that he told us about earlier in the week of people getting picked up when they show up for immigration-related activities. So we'll get to that in just a moment. But first, let's go ahead and take a look at that headline that I just mentioned, which is just after 250 arrests, the federal immigration enforcement surge known as Charlotte's Web in Charlotte, North Carolina, has officially come to an end, according to a local sheriff. Now, a news release from the sheriff's office in Mecklenburg County, which includes Charlotte, said that federal officials have confirmed the 5-day operation has officially concluded. No border agent operations will occur on Thursday, the news release said. A spokesperson for U.S. Customs and Border Protection didn't immediately respond Thursday to an email seeking a response about the sheriff's release. Governor Josh Stein said the raids were spreading fear among residents. He said federal agents in unmarked cars were driving in parking lots, picking people up off sidewalks, going to stores, churches, and grabbing people because of, quote unquote, the color of their skin. Now, federal agents aren't done, though, just because this one is wrapping up in North Carolina. They're still moving on. Federal agents are expected to travel to New Orleans for what ICE is now calling Operation Swamp Sweep, and then on to Mississippi, and after that, New York. Now, earlier this week, as I was mentioning to you just a moment ago, we told you how immigration officers in San Diego were working inside federal buildings, arresting unsuspecting people who are showing up for citizenship and visa appointments. This is video from this morning where migrant advocates held a protest against those detentions. Time now to bring in our San Diego correspondent, Salvador Rivera, to talk about what he's been seeing, joining us live from the federal courthouse in San Diego. Sal?
Rudy, greetings from a chilly San Diego. Of course, 63 is cold for us, but these people were out there in the elements earlier today, about an hour and a half ago. This protest took place. Roughly 80 to 100 people showed up carrying signs. It's just basically concerned over what's been going on in front of the federal building, inside the federal building where this protest was held. The protest was held outside the federal building where a lot of the apprehensions have been taking place. That people are concerned with folks are showing up for interviews for their green card or to their expired visas. And as they go through their interview, they are being arrested, apprehended by ICE agents who, as they say, are lurking in the shadows, hiding in the corridors, in the hallways. Suddenly they spring out and they're arresting people. They are concerned because this has been going on for weeks now here in San Diego, not just at the federal building, but at the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services offices just down the street. People are saying this is not right, it's not fair. In fact, this protest, this demonstration was held as a way to explain and try to describe their feelings, how they are afraid that we are, as Americans, losing our freedoms.
Inside our communities, we protest the murder on the high seas that this administration is committing. We protest the DOJ, the Department of Justice, their revenge tour against people who oppose them, people like us who oppose them. And we particularly here today in front of the immigration court protest the terrorizing of our communities, our neighbors, our friends, and our loved ones.
The attorneys who have been representing immigrants, migrants who are being detained, apprehended. Just a short while ago, we've heard from a man whose wife, a couple showed up with their baby. They showed up for an appointment. She had an appointment to, as she goes through the green card, the resident status process. And during that interview, she was apprehended. And in fact, the husband was telling us that the baby basically taken from her arms as the ICE agents cuffed her and walked her away. So he's inside the building hoping to see her, to be able to chance to talk to her. They have an attorney with them. But she also felt helpless. The attorney was telling us that in her 28 years of practice, she has never encountered anything behind this, what is going on, the violations of people's civil rights to due process. And this is again why this protest was held here in San Diego downtown. Rudy, a lot of people concerned, a lot of people upset, a lot of people worried about what's being going on. ICE agents are apparently just arresting, apprehending people when they show up for appointments. We're also hearing that some people are getting letters, notices that they are to report to the courthouse for appointments, and that the letters turn out to be bogus. And as they walk in, expecting to talk to somebody, that's when they are being apprehended and then hauled away. Some of them are being kept in the basement here at the federal building. From here, then they are taken to the Otay Mesa Detention Center, or they are simply being deported.
All right. Well, thank you so much for following this. We know you've been in and out of that federal courthouse all week, and we appreciate you joining us today. That's our San Diego correspondent, Salvador Rivera, joining us live from the San Diego courthouse, which he's been talking about all week. And if you've missed those episodes of Border Report Live, you can go back and look at his stories, especially the one of a man whose wife was detained while attending a meeting in that federal courthouse that you just saw behind Salvador Rivera. So make sure to check that out on borderreport.com. Coming up next, our South Texas correspondent Sandra Sanchez is going to join us to talk about a few different topics, going from the environmental side to the law enforcement side, immigration enforcement side of everything that's happening from San Antonio down here to the Rio Grande Valley. So stay with us. Border Report Live is back in 1 minute. And welcome back to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles, and I am your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas. Just a few miles, about 30 miles up the road from me right now. Also here in the Rio Grande Valley, our South Texas correspondent Sandra Sanchez joining us today to talk a few different things. And I'm actually really excited about this one because one of my favorite creatures, I guess you could say, are butterflies. And you've got some new reporting on some butterflies that are common down here in South Texas.
Right, Rudy. I mean, who doesn't love butterflies? I'm still sweaty. I just returned from the National Butterfly Center in Mission. What a fun place to go to. Attracts a lot of ecotourism. It's an essential part of the economy here in the Rio Grande Valley. And there is some good news looking up for the monarch butterflies, which had hit an all-time low level of population last year. Now a new study that's out by Texas A&M AgriLife shows that some measures to conserve and protect this very coveted species might be working. The study has found that along Texas highways, the number of monarchs have increased from about 2% last year to about 4% this year. And they are using a number of methods to try to improve this species, which, as you know, crosses the border to Mexico. It's connected to spiritual lore. It's very cultural here. And the numbers have dropped so precipitously. There really was worry that this species was not going to continue to survive, Rudy.
Now, when I look at these things, we often hear from the National Butterfly Center when it comes to topics of immigration. How are things looking out there at the National Butterfly Center right now? Well, obviously their main concern is the butterfly population. So what are they saying they're seeing out in their neck of the woods?
Yeah, okay. So it's been a very summer. There were a lot of winds today, so it's kind of hard to capture some of these guys. I did get a few on camera, but what they are seeing is that people are recognizing the importance of these super pollinators. About 1 in every 3 to 5 foods that we put in our mouths have been pollinated by a butterfly and a monarch butterfly. And yet they themselves are extremely picky eaters. Their larvae, their caterpillars, can only survive by living on milkweed. So they have to find this very specific milkweed that the monarchs can lay their eggs, their larvae on, so that when the larvae hatch, they will survive. And then the monarchs themselves are picky picky and they only eat a certain type of food. So big efforts here to get locals to plant milkweed and the food that the adult monarchs will survive on, as well as clear ditches near roadways of milkweed. Because if there's milkweed in a ditch and a monarch goes to eat it and then a car runs over them, So some of these measures that they've done, and these are prototypes. I'm actually excited. I'm going to interview the PhD, the author of the study, in about an hour, and I'm hoping to hear more details. But they put up these like super fences about 10 feet tall to try to force the monarchs to not fly so low and hit our headlights. I always feel terribly guilty when I drive north to San Antonio and then I get to my destination and I see how many butterflies I've slaughtered on the road, right? And there's really no way to dodge them. They fly kind of like bats. They flit, right? They're not streamlined and smooth. So these prototypes, by placing them at 10 feet up, encourage the monarchs to kind of fly higher up and perhaps over top. They're encouraging people to plant these beds that attract and will feed the larvae and the monarchs, in safe areas where they're not going to be attacked and hurt. And other thing that's really interesting from the study is that they learned there are two definitive migratory pathways, and one is right here through the Rio Grande Valley. That's no surprise to any of us. The other is from Del Rio to Wichita Falls. And so those two migratory routes really need to have those Texas highways protected and all the people living along the way informed and educated.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
There's more to it because the monarch butterfly right now is listed on the endangered species list. However, the Trump administration wants to bump it down to the threatened list. And just this week, President Trump announced that he would roll back protections to species listed on the threatened list. And so what does that mean as far as funding going forward, education efforts going forward, conservation measures? I just interviewed the director of the National Butterfly Center, and she says she hopes that they have seeded enough information out there, and there are so many super supporters of these butterflies that people will continue with these good practice habits, because if they don't, we're going to see this decline like we did last year.
And it's really interesting that you mentioned that, because it does seem to be a growing trend of this, planting butterfly and pollinator-friendly plants across the Rio Grande Valley. I recently was speaking with a garden expert, because we're trying to do this, trying to, spruce up the backyard a little bit for the little one running around at home. And one of our first, priorities was, what can we get in here to attract these butterflies? What can we get in here to attract even honeybees or whatever type of bees are looking, that we're looking to repopulate in the environment down here in the Rio Grande Valley. But an interesting note that you brought up was those the roads, the clearing of ditches. You said that they're kind of test bedding these 10 feet fences, and you mentioned it too about, it looks like a butterfly graveyard whenever you're taking a long distance, trek, whether it be north to San Antonio or even out west towards Rio Grande City, Roma, even as far as Laredo. It feels, like you said, I feel terrible every time I make that trip, because I just see butterfly after butterfly after butterfly hitting the windshield. But who's putting up these 10-foot fences, or is that just kind of something that's in the talks right now?
Yeah, no, it's a combination. Texas A&M University, and let me get my glasses on here, is working with the Texas State Department of Transportation, and it's the Texas A&M College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, and together with the Texas Department of Transportation and the Texas A&M Transportation Institute, they are using what they're calling science-based mapping and modeling to try to support these migration routes and support these super pollinators. So, it's a combination of science and working with the community. And, my husband recently retired, and one of the first things he did was went to the National Butterfly Center and bought milkweed plants from them, and then purchased some above ground gardening. I'm such not a gardener. I don't even know how you
I just call them a
describe it.
trough. Is it like a trough kind of?
Yes.
Yeah.
I grow children and mold, but not plants. Okay. And so he has planted them. He is nourishing them. He's watering them every day, and he's really found it his Zen space. And whenever he sees a monarch, he tells it to come on over to our house, that we're growing milkweed for him, and that they can come live with us. It's the plants are slow going, but it's a craze. He's just really fascinated by them. Out at the Butterfly Center, I talked to some retirees who say they come every year. It was really packed there today. Even though it was so windy, it was hard to really get a close look at them. But I mean, like I said at the beginning, who doesn't love a butterfly?
Yeah, and what's great about, the plants that they're looking for, that specific milkweed, is that a lot of that stuff is that they, typically flock to eat and get nourishment. It's native to the Rio Grande Valley, which is a big problem with our water conservation issues here in the Rio Grande Valley. So, it's one of those things. If you're at home and you live in this area and you're worried about drought, the more plants that you get that can sustain or be sustained without a whole lot of water, that are native to the Rio Grande Valley, native to the area, you're kind of solving two problems here. Speaking of that, clearing those ditches. We talk about that every time hurricane season comes around here. We do have a problem with trash flowing into ditches, similar to what we see, but not as bad as what Salvador has reported on in San Diego, as they put up that trash boom over there. But it's incredible how doing one thing for the environment can have such a ripple effect on so many different things in your local community. So
I'll take that one step further, because the director told me, if you save a butterfly, you don't just save a butterfly, you save the species that live in tandem with the butterfly, that lizard or that sagebush. So really widens the net and scope environmentally. So, and as well as nourishes our economy.
Switching gears a little bit here to immigration enforcement, you're following another story out of San Antonio, I believe. Can you bring us up to speed on that?
Yes, this is new Homeland Security Task Force in South Texas has been established. And, I have to say, out on the border today, I saw so many law enforcement vehicles, unlike I'd seen since, I'd say, the surge started again in 2018, 2019. Since 2021, when Operation Lone Star began down here, we saw troopers every mile. That's what I'm seeing today. So this really is in full force. This is a combination of Homeland Security investigations under DHS and the FBI and a dozen other federal agencies. And it actually came under scrutiny today by Congressman Joaquin Castro and Greg Casares, both of Texas, who were demanding more information about a November 16th raid at a nightclub that apparently resulted in the release of the arrest, of 140 people. So working in tandem, the groups are the Drug Enforcement Administration, ICE, U.S. Marshal Service, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearm, and Explosive, Customs and Border Protection, U.S. Border Patrol, U.S. Attorney's Office, the IRS even, and the U.S. Coast Guard. So what Congressman Castro wants to know is, how many of the people arrested, what evidence did they have provided to a judge to sign a warrant to arrest these people? And what were the parameters of the warrant being executed? He wanted to know exactly which of those entities I named were on site and did the arrest, where the people are in custody, where they're being held, what their nationalities are any U.S. citizens, what crimes are they accused of, any children detained, and what is the rationale for targeting these individuals in this raid? That's a direct quote from this letter, which was sent to Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi, and other high-level Trump officials.
Yeah, and just kind of make an interesting point here to tack on to your reporting on this story is that we've been reporting on the things happening in Chicago over the last couple months, L.A. and San Diego before that, now Charlotte and Raleigh, North Carolina this week, and next week it's going to be New Orleans, Louisiana, and shortly after that another location. But I think for the people at home, it kind of paints a picture that this type of enforcement, this level of boots on the ground for these law enforcement agencies is nothing new to us south of San Antonio. This is something that's been going on, as you mentioned, since 2018, 2019, 2020. We've seen the slow increase, but I just thought it was important to mention that just because so often we focus on these other parts of the country, right. And to us, we see it every day. I can't get to work and back home without seeing at least 20 Border Patrol trucks on the expressway back and forth. Not to mention
the numbers had kind of backed off as far as the troopers that we had been seeing for a while there. If you try to drive to Rio Grande City in Starr County, about 40 miles west, you would see one every mile. Now it appears that this surge of force is back, and they are focusing on this area, and what the results will be as far as, raids to construction sites or restaurants or, families, people not going to school or leaving their houses, going to church. I'm sure the word has filtered out in the communities by now that, there are many, many watchful eyes, not to mention the 287G program where law enforcement, local law enforcement, lend their support to federal officers. And I did see a number of Mission police that were out, McAllen police that were out. So, a lot of complaints living here on the border. People say it's, quote, a militarized zone. It's certainly very patrolled. But there's one thing that I always like to communicate that I think a lot of people don't realize is that it's actually really a very, very safe place to live because we don't have a lot of homelessness. We don't have a lot of crimes. We don't have murders and rapes. A lot of that, serious crime, our numbers, FBI stats show. And I think a lot of that is because there are so many law enforcement agents concentrated in the area. It's a beautiful, clean place to live. Just don't speed down the roads. Yeah,
and City of McAllen and the City of Brownsville, the largest city in the Rio Grande Valley, both have made, I want to say, the top 20 of safest cities in America for several years in a row. And that's from different organizations making that determination using different metrics. So, it's very interesting to see the narrative versus what we actually experience down here. And I will say, like you mentioned, I live right around the corner from where we had Florida Highway Patrol here when they were here at one point during Operation Lone Star. Their National Guard and their state troopers as well. And it's been a long time since I've crossed one of them on my morning run, to say hi or whatever it is, because there was groups, going together in formation on their morning runs, and I would see them every morning. But it has been a while since that, so it should be interesting to see what picks up in the coming days. Thank you so much, Sandra. We appreciate you being here today. Sandra Sanchez, our South Texas correspondent. Stay with us. Border Report Live is back in 1 minute. Welcome back to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Midelis, your host here in Harlingen, Texas. Got one more headline that we wanted to share with you before we leave you for the day, and that is that the U.S. Border Patrol is monitoring millions of American drivers nationwide in a secret program to identify and detain people whose travel patterns it deems suspicious. Now, an Associated Press investigation found that the predictive intelligence program has resulted in people being stopped, searched, and in some cases arrested. A network of cameras scans and record vehicles, license plate information, and an algorithm flags vehicles deemed suspicious based on where they came from, where they are going, and which route they took.
I'm gonna have you sit in the back seat while I search. I'm not gonna put handcuffs on you or nothing, right? But you are detained because of the positive alert. If we don't find nothing in there, then you'll be good to go, man. Okay?
You think you're just driving around, doing your job, doing things with your kids and family, and you find out the government is tracking your location and your whereabouts as you go about your normal life. And they're using this to suggest that a citizen might be doing something wrong.
plate readers are incredibly powerful surveillance. They are collecting mass amounts of information about who people are, where they go, what they do, and who they know. And then that information is now being weaponized by the federal government to identify, track, and arrest community members.
Federal agents in turn may then flag local law enforcement. The Border Patrol says it uses license plate readers to help identify threats and disrupt criminal networks and are governed by federal law and constitutional protections. That's going to do it for today's episode. For Salvador Rivera in San Diego, Sandra Sanchez right here in the Rio Grande Valley, my name is Rudy Mireles. We'll see you all next time.